All right. We are live here at 83weeks.com. We've got a special guest today. We don't usually do guests, right? You guys know that. Usually I get on here by myself and rant and rave and act a fool, but we're going to go about it a little bit differently because today we're talking about Real American Freestyle. Really excited to do this. And the first guest we've had on this show to talk about Real American Freestyle, Ben Askren. Ben, welcome to the show, man.
I am so excited to be here. I'm so excited to be a part of Real American Freestyle. I've listened to a lot of pitches for professional wrestling. I've tried myself twice over the years. It was one of my life dreams to make it happen, and I think you guys might have a good recipe for it.
So why do you think it hasn't happened yet? No, obviously, let's just, give credit where credit is due and respect the people that have tried it before us, because it's not an easy task, and there's a lot of obstacles. But if you could pick one that you think has been the biggest challenge for everybody so far, what do you think it's been?
Well, I'm gonna pick two. So number one would be, the first two times I tried this would be like 2012 and 2013 maybe. The ability for people to actually watch wrestling was not really there. And you think of like when I was a kid growing up, there was literally no live wrestling available to me. I couldn't be a fan of the sport because I couldn't follow the sport. I couldn't watch the matches and see everything unfolding. Since Flow Wrestling and Big Ten Network and other people got involved, our ability to follow the sport has went up like through the roof, right? The second part of it is that the Olympic system is so strong that it's such a priority of athletes to make Olympic teams. They will forego better monetary opportunities if it doesn't suit them for their Olympic pursuits.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that Olympic pursuit is probably a 12-month out of the year pursuit. It's not a season, right? You're not talking about a three-month season. You're talking about training year-round, competing year-round, because there's freestyle tournaments all over the world 365 days a year, right? I mean, they're all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of the senior athletes don't get it. They don't have a huge match count on an annual basis. And that is, if I was in charge of all wrestling all over the world, one of the things I would do is I would actually create a better season, because, with any type of sport, you want to follow it from one step to the next step to the next step. You don't want a scenario where no one knows what's going on. It's very sporadic. That's really bad for, spectatorship or viewership for that type of stuff.
What is the community? Because you're obviously very involved in the community. You have your own wrestling academy, wrestling school that you're very active in.
7 of them.
7 of them. Then you are very busy.
Let's go.
But what's the vibe in the community? I know there's excitement, but
yes,
are people skeptical, hopeful, or just gung ho?
I would say hopeful. I was actually at a wrestling event last weekend in Louisville. There was the World Team Trials paired with there's something called the Central Regional, which is we'll say 10 through 18-year-old event. A lot of good wrestlers, though. I got approached by so many people about it. Our friend Izzy Martinez was there talking to people. And it was really cool. A lot of people were really excited to see it happen. I think there is this genuine hope or desire within the wrestling community for something on the professional level to work, because we've seen a lot of people try, whether it was Real Pro Wrestling was the one that put a bunch of money to it back in like the mid-2000s. And there have been a bunch of other smaller people. Flo has dabbled a little bit in and out of it, but no one's really made a really full-fledged push. And actually, one of the things that I loved about what you guys said was, I always thought after trying it twice, I thought whoever does this needs like a 5-year runway, right? They need to build this thing. And in order to have a 5-year runway, you got to raise money, right? Because it is not going to be profitable on day one, and you got to build significance, right? So a lot of people kind of like neglect that fact. So a UFC belt, the first time they put it up for grabs, it didn't have significance because no one knew what it meant, right? But now you have this long history of what a UFC belt means, and there's a lot of significance behind it, and a lot of kids look up to it, right? And in wrestling, it's the Olympics. People look up to the Olympics. And so we need time. You need time to build significance so that the Real American Freestyle title, it means something. And every little kid wants one of those belts when they grow up, right? That's what it really needs.
And I think that to that same point, and maybe to expand on it a little more, I use this analogy often lately. It's like if you would have gone into any bar in the United States on a Friday night and pulled out a dozen 18 to 49-year-old men 20 years ago and said, "Hey, what's a rear naked choke?" they would think you're describing a scene in a porn movie, right?
Yes.
Now, if you ask 20 years later, if you pull 12 guys out of a bar, 18 to 49, but let's say 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and you said, "Hey, how many of you know what a rear naked choke is?" They can not only tell you, they could demonstrate it on you.
Yes. Yeah. That's totally correct.
They've educated the audience. You can't be a fan of something that you don't understand the nuances of, right?
Yeah.
That's another point to your runway, is that just takes time. You can't market that. You can't put it in a package and send it to somebody. It just takes time. Yeah. And that's one of the big challenges.
100%. With fighting, it's kind of almost even funnier because, if you would have said, take those 18 to 49-year-old men and you say, "Hey, we're going to take a poll of what the most effective fighting strategy is." In 1993, they likely would have said boxing or karate or something like this. And then, what we've found out for a while in the sport of mixed martial arts is it's way different, right? It was the jiu-jitsu and the grappling and the wrestling that dominated for many years. And now it's actually kind of making a little bit of a flip because so many people are getting good at wrestling. It's almost like nullifying each other, right? Because everyone's equally skilled, and it's going back to a lot of the stand-up fighting that people would have predicted it would have been. So, it's kind of funny that because the nuance of fighting is probably a lot different than what most people would have anticipated it looked like if, say, you watch a Roadhouse or, one of those old movies where, they have all the fancy karate moves that don't really work.
Let's talk a little bit about freestyle wrestling, even amateur wrestling, and the transition into MMA. And when you look at some of the big names in MMA, and I'm a casual MMA fan, I'm by no means an expert, but you don't have to be an expert to recognize names like John Jones and Daniel Cormier and people that come from a freestyle or amateur wrestling background. It seems to me that freestyle wrestling is really an important part of the foundation for successful career in MMA. And you proved it. You have 19-2 record in MMA, and most of your career is spent in amateur wrestling.
Yes. Yeah. For a long time, it was actually funny because for a long time, the very best wrestlers were going to mixed martial arts because there wasn't any opportunity. If you think of my Olympic team, over half of us made a transition to mixed martial arts. So Daniel Cormier, Henry Cejudo, myself, and Steve Mocco fought for a little. He didn't fight for a long time. He fought for a little bit. So over 50%, there's 7 freestyle wrestlers. 4 out of the 7 ended up competing in mixed martial arts. 3 of them really, really, really successfully. And a lot of that was because there was no monetary opportunities in sport of freestyle wrestling. Now that has actually changed a little bit where these guys are making I was making literally no money being competing in freestyle wrestling. Now they're making enough to make a happy living, we'll say. Hopefully Real American Freestyle can even bump that up more, but we're not seeing the very, very best American wrestlers make the transition from wrestling to mixed martial arts. A lot of them are staying in wrestling now, which for us wrestlers is really awesome. But you're not seeing, so now people are excited about, say, a Bo Nickel, who is a very high-level wrestler who chose to compete in mixed martial arts, but it's not nearly as frequent as it was, say, a decade ago.
Now, obviously, you had a great career in mixed martial arts and obviously in wrestling, as you pointed out, having made the Olympic team, Pan American champion, I think in 2005, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, so your amateur wrestling career speaks for itself. You made the transition to MMA. How tough was that for you to go from all of the action on the mat to guys trying to kick and punch you?
Yeah, I love combat, so it wasn't hard. My whole life, I've kind of enjoyed being combative. I was a combative little kid. I actually think, not to get on another subject matter or total topic in general, but I think America kind of neuters a lot of young boys and takes the aggression out of them when, part of me says some young boys are meant to be aggressive, right? We're meant to be warriors and scrappers. And so for as long as I can remember, that's what I liked. And so when I went into fighting, it was oh, this is so much fun. This is something new. This is something cool. Obviously my wrestling skill set allowed me to have quite a bit of success early on, because it was I could just take him down. If I couldn't do anything else, I could just take him down and hold him down. Right. And it did take a few years to kind of start putting a lot of pieces to the puzzle of how do I use my elbows and really, smash their face and cut them open. And how do I finish the submission holds? Right. Because that's not something I did my whole life. But it was a relatively easy transition because I loved combat. I loved working hard, and I was just ready for it.
Do you think that because I think most UFC fans, I would imagine, I guess, is the best way to say it, recognize wrestling as such a powerful component to an overall MMA career. Do you think that adds a little bit of potential success for Real American Freestyle? I guess this is wishful thinking on my part, right?
No,
like
UFC. I think you're completely right. I mean, I think honestly, I just think the sport of wrestling has been elevated. I made one point earlier, which is that it wasn't a spectator sport. Like even 15 years ago, like you couldn't watch the biggest events live. Even maybe 5 years ago, a lot of the international level events were really hard to watch live. And now we can do that. So we can become fans of the sport. But I do think mixed martial arts has brought awareness to how tough wrestlers are. And I think it has helped give validation, I guess you'd say. I don't know if that's the right word, but give validation to the sport of wrestling. And this again, not to go down another rabbit hole, but I kind of think there's going to be a golden era of American men coming because the American man has been sissified in the last 10 years. And I think people are just kind of sick of it. And they realize, I see this, right? I coach little kids all the time. And I see so many parents are bringing their kids in because they know their young boys need to be tougher.
And they need the confidence. It's one of the great things, whether it's,
huge
martial arts, amateur wrestling. I like you believe contact sports builds character. It teaches you discipline, teaches you self-respect, teaches you respect for others. Otherwise, you won't last long in that environment. You'll be ostracized or get your ass kicked, one or the other.
Yes.
And you learn. You just learn. And I think it's an important thing. So
no, it's huge for like to your point, I was training a couple new managers last week. And one of the really important things I said is for a lot of young men, this is the first place where they'll realize they're capable. And I can say for me, dude, that was a life-changing moment. I realized, hey, I did some hard work and then I got better because I did the hard work and I did a little more hard work and I got a little better. Holy shit, I'm capable of doing this, right? Like if I can do that. And then I started learning, well, I just keep working harder. I'm just going to keep having more success. And then state title, national title, college scholarship, Olympics, and I keep going. And then once I get into wrestling, it's like, okay, let me just apply this to let me apply this to everything else. Let me apply this to building this business, right? Or let me apply this to being a great mixed martial artist. And so, yeah, when you learn that you're capable as a young man in wrestling, it's really, really a powerful thing for your life.
Before we go on, I want to talk about some proposed rule changes that you want to propose for Real American Freestyle. But before I do that, I want to touch on your career one more time.
Sure.
So I think we have kind of a mutual contact. Did you train martial arts at all out of Milwaukee?
Of course.
Who'd you train with?
Duke Rufus.
I used to compete with his dad.
Oh, really? That's funny.
And Rick Rufus, when he was a little kid, he used to change me around. Took karate in Minneapolis, and he would
too funny.
Come up, and Rick Rufus would grab onto my leg, and I'd be dragging him around the
Duke's a really great guy. So that's my son Ozzy. Ozzy, say hi. Hi. Ozzy needs to go play and wrestle a little bit. Go. Buddy, I'm on a show. You got to go do it yourself. Go. All right. I moved to Milwaukee in 2011. At that point, I was the Bellator champion, but I decided I really need to kind of do this full time. I was actually college wrestling coaching, and it was great to be able to come home. And Duke had a great stable of fighters at that point. Anthony Pettis, who was a UFC champion, Tyron Woodley, who was a UFC champion. Man, we had a really, really great group of guys. So it was awesome. I fought through 2017. I retired for the first time. And then when I came out of retirement, I actually just I was making enough money at that point to say, I'm going to do everything in my gym, right here at home, home base. And I was paying training partners to come in. So, I paid Duke to help me. And I still see him every couple of months. I'll see Duke around, and he's doing really well.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Now let's talk about rule changes. Izzy Martinez, he's our COO. He's kind of the guy. He's our wrestling guy. Izzy, I won't go into his accolades. We've covered him a lot most recently.
He's great.
But he's the backbone of Real American Freestyle when it comes to the athletes. Now, Izzy is a little reluctant to discuss potential rule changes. We want to operate under freestyle rules. So the rules are consistent. Everybody's used to them. You, on the other hand, have a little different take. Why don't you explain it to us?
Well, you know what? I actually, so in my first go at this, we did change the rules significantly, and that was a sticking point. So I'm actually mostly on board with not changing the rules and keeping it really in line with what most of these international wrestlers are doing. That being said, there's a few that are just too stupid not to change. And the biggest one is potentially dangerous. I have advocated for this change. So for you non-wrestling fans, what potentially dangerous means is there is a situation in which someone may get injured, and therefore we're going to stop the bout, right? We're going to stop and we're going to start over. So, especially when you're dealing with kids, great. We need it. I don't want a bunch of kids to be getting hurt, right? Especially when it's like, at every little local tournament, it's not going to have the best referees watching. I don't want kids to get hurt. But like with something like this, we're going to have the best referees and we're going to have the best adult wrestlers, right? And these are grown men who can make grown man decisions. And most potentially dangerous happens because one person is refusing to say go to his back to alleviate the pain, right? So someone has an arm bar on me and they're cranking, right? I could try to hold myself up my back until the ref calls potentially dangerous and stops it. But if there's not there, then I have to go to my back, right? And so essentially what potentially dangerous is doing for most grown men is disabling them from pinning their opponent, which is the goal of the sport of wrestling, right? Is turning them over to their back and then pinning them. And so I feel like it's a big cop-out, and I think it's something that would enhance the sport big time, and something that with the amount of matches and the referees we're having, we're very capable of doing, and I think we should do it for sure.
And I talked to Izzy after you and I spoke the other morning, and we talked about this very subject. And I think Izzy's, he's on the fence. I think he's leaning in your direction.
Don't be a wimp, Izzy.
We want to encourage. If you're a freestyle wrestling fan and you've got an opinion, really love to hear what you have to say. So let us know. Do you think we should eliminate the potentially dangerous rule or keep it in place?
Now let me add to that. I think you don't just want people being malicious and trying to hurt each other, of course, right? So I still think, these are athletes who are under contract. This is a business. So I think you could, of course, put something in that says, if you're maliciously using submission holds, right? If I arm bar my opponent, that is not a wrestling move. I am doing that with the intent to injure, then I could be either fined or suspended from the league or terminated potentially from the league, right? So if I'm being malicious and trying to injure my opponent, that is, right, that's out of bounds, fine, suspension, whatever. But hey, if I'm trying to run a half Nelson, or if I'm trying to run a bar and my opponents want to go over, that's his choice. So he needs to roll over or he needs to get hurt. One of the two. That's a grown man making a grown man choice.
Do you think that, I'm going to jump around a little bit, do you think Real American Freestyle and this opportunity for more competition, more access for people to make a living competing and all that, do you think it will help the U.S.? I know this seems like a stretch, but do you think it'll help in the long run as far as Olympic hopefuls? Meaning if there's more freestyle competition, more kids at a younger age are learning freestyle so they don't have to adapt out of high school as abruptly.
Yeah.
Do you think that's
you know what? That we aren't having a lot of people leave the sport. Like I said, my Olympic class, 4 out of 7 left the sport. We aren't having that happen. So maybe not that much, but I do think if athletes can make real money, there will be more of them that stick around. If you look at the senior freestyle rankings, there's a lot of guys who would say maybe be 5 through 15 ranked guys who once they finish college, they're just like, I'm just going to get a job. I don't want to make no money. I'm going to go get a job and work and do that kind of thing. And that's a reasonable choice, of course. But if they're able to make real money doing this, now maybe it's something they stick around, and you never know how someone's going to develop, right? So maybe someone who's number 7 today in 4 years becomes number 1.
And I'm going to let you go here in a few minutes because I know you've got a class to teach. I really appreciate your time. And let's just let it go at that. We're going to catch it up next time when we got a little bit more time. I'm going to be down to see you. We're going to do a long form interview with you and really let the audience who doesn't already know you really get to know you in a different way. And I think, creating that, I call it infotainment, really, is teaching people about freestyle wrestling and amateur wrestling for younger kids and just educating them on the sport. And you're going to be one of the keys to doing that, brother. And I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I'm so excited for this opportunity. Like I said, I've heard a lot of other pitches over the last decade because I've put out there many times that this is something one of my life goals is to make this happen for American wrestlers. And, honestly, for you guys are signing international guys, which is totally awesome. So I am so excited to help you guys make a run at this and try to blow this thing up. I think America is ready for it. I think wrestling is ready for it. And I hope we kill it.
You're a big asset, Ben. Thank you very much, brother. I'll let you get back to those kids.
Thank you. See ya.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, man. And we're going to be sticking around here. We're going to answer a couple of questions. So if you've got questions and you want to fire them my way, feel free to do it. Cass Holmes, David M., Little Jimmy Sorensen, James Weston. Glad you guys are all here. Super Dave, you see any chats there that we should pull up? Ask a Bomb wants to know, Eric, I've come to the conclusion that basically impossible to beat a Polynesian in a fair shoot fight. Do you agree? I have zero experience in that regard. Fortunately, I've evolved intellectually to the point where if that's opportunity or situation, I should refer to it as, because it would not be an opportunity, it would be a situation. But if it were to happen to me, judgment would be the better course of action as opposed to valor. So I'd just get the hell out of there. I don't know the answer, but I wouldn't want to find out. How's that for an answer? Josh Holmes asked Eric, asked Ben, my son Caleb is a great wrestler as a 16-year-old. What advice would you give him to pursue something like RAF? Is the transition hard from folk style to freestyle? I tried to touch on that, and I didn't really ask the question very well. But folk style wrestling, high school wrestling, and then college wrestling, and then you have freestyle Olympic level wrestling, Olympic style wrestling. The rules are different between high school and freestyle, folk style and freestyle. And it takes a period of time to adapt. I never went through that experience, so I can't tell you about it. I can just tell you based on previous conversations I've had that transition takes a while, which is why I asked the question, does Ben think, or I should have asked the question more clearly, does Ben think that more freestyle competition, which will attract more wrestlers to the party, might help collapse the learning curve or the adjustment curve between folk style and freestyle? That's a better question. And there's so much freestyle wrestling going on all over the place. I think personally, just kind of common sense, I guess, if we're able to do what we intend to do and hope to do and can visualize what we're going to do with Real American Freestyle, it will create so much more opportunity that it will encourage younger athletes. This is my hope, not a statement of fact. It will encourage younger athletes. I'm talking about 10, 12, 14, 16, 18-year-old kids that are into amateur wrestling. They'll know about freestyle. They'll be familiar with the differences between, and they'll learn and adjust more quickly than they might otherwise. Wow. That was long. I hope I at least answered the question. I'm sorry, Ben is no longer here. He had to teach his class, and I promised him we'd kind of get him in and get him out so we didn't disrupt his course of business. Does a major size difference, 30 pounds or more, matter in a fight? I think physics, Ben isn't here to answer that, and I wouldn't even attempt to speak for him, but I can tell you from personal experience, having danced that dance more than one time, it certainly can, but not always. How's that for an answer? Love that. Thanks for the question, though, man. James Weston, this is probably an obvious question, but I'm assuming there will be different weight classes. Yes, we will be announcing weight classes. We're going to establish 8 men's divisions and 2 women's divisions. So that is our August 30th card from Wolstein Center. You'll be reading about that shortly. Where we're going to have our first event, you will see 8 men's matches, 2 women's matches, and yeah, kind of fun, huh? All right, a couple more questions if we've got them. Is there much difference between mixed martial arts when you were in it to now? Asked Eric. I wasn't in mixed martial arts because it didn't exist back when I was active in martial arts. I took a form of martial arts. The style was referred to as Jhoonrhee, Jhoonrhee. Jhoonrhee, I think it was JH, might have been JOO. Either way, Junri karate. It was a very modified form of the Korean style of martial arts, referred to as Taekwondo. But it was more practical, not as flashy, could be occasionally, but really more designed for true self-defense and high-level competition. Mixed martial arts today is so much different than that, and I think probably much better in terms of a form of discipline when you're able to learn how to take care of yourself on the ground as well as on your feet. Obviously, you're more well-rounded, more well-rounded capabilities when it comes to taking care of yourself. It's just kind of common sense. But my involvement in martial arts ended about 1981. So that was like 100 years ago, I think. I'd have to get out my calculator. It'll be close. But yeah, it's probably changed a lot. Like everything, brother. Like everything. Ask about, are you recruiting Maya Lesnar? It hasn't come up. But I did check her out on social the other day. Oh, man. And I thought to myself, I wonder if somebody in WWE is not going, hey, maybe we should reach out, because she is really something. Amazing athlete. Follows in her daddy's footsteps, to be sure. David M., love to know if you plan on seeking a single paid outlet platform, or might you take notes from groups like Kings League and get on as many outlet streaming as possible, or traditional? I think I read that right. Very good question. I love that question. So right now we're open to everything, right? I mean, let's be realistic. Any major cable outlet that we would want to be on has already made their programming decisions probably by the first of the year. They knew what they were going to program for the balance of the year. And they need to know that, because when they go into the upfronts, which is where advertising is sold, that's where all your big advertising dollars come from. And those buyers, those advertising agencies, are buying specific blocks of programming, right? If you're a advertising agency that's representing Mercedes, you're going to want first dibs on all the golf action, right? For example. So a lot of that commercial inventory gets sold out early on in the first part of the year. And then what's left over used to be called, I don't know what it's called now, it used to be called remnant advertising, meaning it's just sitting in inventory waiting for somebody to buy it. And their ad sales teams continue to try to buy it throughout the year, but it's less desirable because you're not sure where it's going to end up. Basically, it could end up anywhere on a schedule, your 30-second spot, as opposed to, I want my 30-second spot for this brand new Mercedes to be the very first commercial position in the US Open, for example. Okay. So since we know that most programming decisions are made at least 6 months in advance, commitments, we know that a lot of advertising decisions and commitments have been made at least 6 months or even more in advance, we recognize there's probably not a lot of real estate that would be really exciting that's just available. No network is sitting out there with some primetime real estate going, we'll just see what happens. Maybe something will come along and we'll fill it up. It doesn't work that way. So we know that, right? So with that in mind, we are looking for a partner for this very first premier event. And hopefully that could be a partner that has a streaming platform so that the programming availability isn't as much of an issue. It will be someone that wants to be in business with us and own this sport worldwide in the long run, as Ben was talking about. This is not a week one plan or a 6-month plan or a 1-year plan. This is a 5-year plan. And we're looking for networks or cable outlets that have an interest in owning this sport. So that's going to be a longer process. But in the meantime, we will end up on a streaming platform. Which one, we're not sure yet. We may, because we are in discussions with cable outlets and a streaming platform, we may be able to announce something within the next 45 days. Just takes a while to put deals together. But assuredly, we will be on somewhere. In terms of where we go long term, That's a bigger question. I'm not going to drop any names, but I've got some ideas. We'll see what happens. All right. Super Dave, do we have time for one more? Cass Holmes, do you still talk to Kevin Nash on the reg like you do Hulk? I don't talk to either one of them on the reg. To be honest with you, I don't talk to anybody on the phone. I really, really don't enjoy talking on the phone recreationally. If it's business, I'm all in, but I generally only talk about business. I don't chit chat much. Here's an example. I love my brother and sister dearly, dearly. They live in Minnesota. I talk to them combined. Like if you add up the minutes that I talk to my brother and my sister on the phone over the course of a given year, we've already been on this show twice as long as that would probably add up to. Now, I'll drive 1,000 miles to cook steak and have a beer with him. That'll do. But I don't chit chat. So I stay in touch with Kevin. I stay in touch with Hulk. I talk to Hulk more frequently now because of business, of course. But, you know, I'm just not that phone friend. I'm not that guy. But if you need anything in person, you call me. All right, let's wrap it up. Super Dave, thank you very much. This has been fun. Thank all of you for joining us. Special thank you to Ben Askren, a valuable asset, big part of the team here at Real American Freestyle. And keep supporting the cause. See you guys.